Well, hi there, my name's Danny Bradbury and welcome to your World of Reg. We have two individuals from Quarles and Brady, a large IT law firm here today. Their names are Rich Rather, IT Manager, and also the Published Systems Architect, Dan Putnam. Now, Richard and Dan have been busy upgrading Quarles and Brady's systems and implementing a whole virtual desktop integration solution. They've been putting a lot of their client machines onto the server. We're going to find out why they've done that and how they've done that over the course of this podcast. So, Rich and Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you much.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this question out to really either of you first. Could you talk a bit about the law firm? You know, give me some statistics. How many people work there? How many offices? What your challenges were, and why you decided to go down the VDI path?
Sure, I'll field that question. This is Rich. Quarles and Brady is a national law firm. It's about 1,000 employees. We have 7 offices across the United States, and we do have actually a footprint in China as well. We don't have any equipment on the ground in China, but we do have users in our China office that do use our VDI implementation as well to access firm systems. So from a standpoint of virtualization, we are a heavy virtualized environment on a server platforms. We have about 350 servers, which is a heavy server-based to user ratio, and about 80% of that is virtualized today. We also do have a large VDI implementation. Currently today we've got about 550 Windows 7 desktops virtualized in the environment today, and we started down that path, I would say, probably about 2.5, 3 years ago, Dan. And we originally started for a remote access environment, really a replacement solution to the old Citrix Metaframe environment. And it's kind of grown from there. It really took off when we had issues with business continuity and being able to support a large user base remotely in case of the swine flu. And that's really what gave us a lot of our funding. The business came back to us and said, hey, if we have to shut down an office or a bunch of offices, how many people can you support on this platform? And so it really gave the VDI environment legs, and since then it's really grown above and beyond just a remote access platform. We are starting to see a lot of different use cases within the environment, utilizing WISE terminals and actually having them as desktops in the environment for primary desktops for users, and then also starting to extend it to the mobile platforms as well.
And so now talk a bit about how you actually designed and implemented the system. Let's start with what you had before you rolled out a VDI solution.
Sure, Dan, why don't you field that one? Sure. So before we actually started our VDI environment, we had, a half dozen to a dozen servers that we housed a standard published desktop on. We could support about 8 to 10 users realistically on a box under regular load, just because of the suite of applications that we have and the integration that we have with those applications inside that desktop. So basically, we were starting from the ground up. It was not an environment in which we could support any sort of business continuity planning at all. So we kind of looked at it and said, okay, we had the goal. We had to meet, I think it was originally 250 concurrent desktops or concurrent connections we needed to support at any particular one point in time. So we all kind of sat back and, we milled it over, going, how many servers would we need to add in order to support a Citrix desktop, a traditional server published desktop. And the economics just weren't working out. We were looking at it going, okay, first of all, we don't have the tight integration like we would on our regular user desktop. We didn't have all the same applications available. And, the user experience wasn't the same. So people would log in their workstations, they'd see the Windows 7 interface, or actually Windows XP at the time. And we couldn't really reproduce that, that same kind of look and feel as we could on a Windows 2003 or Windows 2008 backend. So it kind of went, all right, we need to change directions. This isn't a model we can sustain long term. The hardware costs were going to become outrageous. And the user experience really wasn't there. If one user really went haywire, even with all of the mitigation that we had in place for processor throttling and memory throttling, the environment just was not sustainable in that kind of a model. Zen Desktop had been out for a little bit. We had played around with it early on, and we're like, hey, this is kind of a neat technology, but is it really ready for prime time? And, one thing led to another, and we said, well, let's see if it is ready for prime time. So we went with a vendor and a partner, and we kind of kicked the tires around with it a little bit and said, yeah, this is probably the direction we need to be going in for multiple reasons. And all the other things kind of started falling into place all around it, going, okay, we're going to need storage to get this going. We're going to need a good consistent server back end to get this going. And we can really, extend it as we want. If we want to add more server or we want to add more capacity, it is simply just a matter of adding, an additional server, and then we can spin up X number of desktops per environment. So we saw the scalability right off the get-go. We saw the flexibility, the consistent user experience, everything we were looking for, as an addition to what we were currently offering as a remote access platform, right from the get-go, really.
So list out again the components of the solution.
So, actually, they really haven't changed a whole lot. We've kind of upgraded them as they went along. We started with, they were Dell 1950s, I think, Rich, is that right?
Yeah, actually, for the back end, it was Dell 2850s originally. We run Zen Desktop as the broker. We run it on top of VMware ESX as the hypervisor. So we're kind of a split environment there. But we started out with Dell 2850s, and since then we've, with technology advancements in the environment, we've moved up to Dell R710s in some of the offices, and some of our offices actually have Dell Blade servers as well. So it really depends if you're sitting, if you connect up to a desktop that sits in one of our data centers or one of our smaller remote offices. Based upon what the back-end solution is. But in conjunction with that, we are 10 gig in a majority of the environment as well. Our VDI implementations went to 10 gig right off the bat. And then we are running Dell storage on the back end, Dell EqualLogix, the PS6010 XVSs, which are a hybrid solid-state and SAS array mix within the same chassis. And for the VDI environments, it's worked out really well with, speeding up the provisioning of desktops, handling any type of boot storm we would have in the environment, et cetera.
And for the provisioning servers on the Zen desktop side, we're running physical 710s in our data center offices, and we actually have in the other locations we have virtualized provisioning servers just intermixed in with the desktop environments for those farms.
Great. Okay, so you managed to avoid any bootstorming problems by creating a nice fat link between the storage area network and the provisioning servers. But then could you talk about any other challenges that you ran across when you were implementing VDI?
Sure. One of the big ones we noticed right off the get-go was how to get speed typing controllable. In the legal vertical, typing is probably just as important as any other piece of the end user experience. If they type slow, or if the appearance is that the screen is lagging behind, it's kind of a unusable experience for the users because they can all type fairly fast. So one of the challenges we needed to overcome, or one of the obstacles we wanted to make sure we overcame right away, was making sure that the screen was as lag free as possible. So one of the things that we ended up doing was actually, we kind of deviated a lot from the specs for what the normal guidelines for building out a VDI desktop would be. We gave all of our VDIs dual proc right off the get-go, and we gave them, in the Windows XP world, each workstation had 4 gig of RAM, and when we went to Windows 7 64-bit, we upped it to 6 gig of RAM. That seemed to be really the sweet spot for basically a complete lag-free environment inside the offices. When you're externally, there's an occasional lag that we get every once in a while, but we're constantly evolving the system to try to take advantage of the new technologies that are available, going to blades, going to the 10 gig infrastructure. We're taking advantage of all those things to completely make this. We want this to be completely as seamless as possible. We don't want users to be able to even know that they're on a VDI environment. That is the ultimate goal. They shouldn't know that they're actually using a VDI environment, a desktop environment at all. So, those constant little tweaks and challenges as, software vendors release new versions of software, making sure that it's completely optimized in our VDI environment. Trying to stay on top of those kinds of technologies. Citrix does they release a new product about every year for their Zen desktop environment. So taking advantages of all the things that they wrap in to their product offering, the HDX experience, all of the caching, intelligent caching that they're doing on the back end, utilizing those technologies to make this a completely seamless environment. So, those are kind of the daily challenges too, is, looking at all of the product offerings that are out there, seeing how they integrate within our desktop environment, and then finding out how we can overcome those either with, a new piece of software or another piece of technology, or, modifying some existing code to make it do exactly what we want it to do.
Well, so the speed typing is one issue. What other applications are you finding yourself running in a legal environment? I imagine there's a lot of Office stuff, but probably not much multimedia to deal with.
No, actually, most of the multimedia are homegrown stuff, things that our chairman produces, internal communications, things of that matter. There are some of the legal groups that do look at online streaming, video, media, court feeds, things of that nature, depositions. Those are video depositions in particular that have a rich video content. You're dead on the Office piece. The Office suite itself is primarily the lifeblood of this law firm, and I would think most legal verticals as it pertains. Just simply, most of the attorneys live in Outlook. Our document management system is integrated into Outlook, so Outlook kind of becomes the central hub for where 70 to 80% or more of the user experience is actually launched or executed or viewed inside Outlook proper. And then we have over 400 applications here, which is a lot, but we've managed to stream a lot of those applications to provide a seamless experience for the users, no matter whether they're on Wise or on a thick machine. So even those applications that we haven't integrated into Outlook, we've virtualized those applications to make them available and seamlessly, since there's no install for a virtualized application, they just simply execute in the background. And the users don't actually have to go through or worry about, is this application installed or not on my VDI desktop. They're just simply there in an on-demand type fashion. So we actually use the same build process for our golden image for our desktop as we do our VDI desktop. So they share the exact same build procedure. So whenever we build, we built our one golden image for Windows 7 that we've had now for over a year. We used the exact same process to build that as we did to build our regular physical desktop. So we've done a good job between our SECM implementation and our Zen desktop implementation to really make that desktop a unified platform, again, independent of where you sit, either physical or virtual.
And what about, talking about where you sit, what about the mobile contingent? Are there many people that use these desktops on the road, and then do you have issues with sort of unreliable networks, cellular networks and so forth?
Yeah, well, you're right. With any kind of mobile technology, you're always at the mercy of whatever your internet connection or whatever lies between you and the closest data center to where you are. So, yeah, that is kind of an inherent drawback of a virtual desktop of that type. The only saving grace, however, is since if you do become disconnected at any point in time, you really haven't lost your work. If it's gone, if you've lost your connectivity, you simply reconnect and your desktop's right back up where you were. Whatever the last thing you typed is usually there, minus a couple letters depending on when you typed them. But the beauty of the environment is even if you become totally disconnected, power outage, whatever, you can reconnect it whenever you get a connectivity type of some type, and you're back in and you haven't lost any data. Your document is still there, your Word still open, the document's still there. So you're right. You are kind of at the mercy of a consistent and persistent internet connection, but that's almost an expectation now. You look at tablets, you look at phones. Basically, all of those are falling under the same premises. If you don't really have a good internet connection of some type, or at least some sort of data connection of some type, you're really not going to get any updates for what you really want. So, we've just kind of piggybacked on the fact that a persistent, reliable internet connection is becoming more of the norm rather than less of the norm. And in some cases that gets a little tricky in some areas where there's still not any broadband technologies in some rural areas and stuff like that. And it is a little slow for those people that come in, but again, that's a smaller contingency rather than the norm. Now, the norm is you've usually got, very high bandwidth connectivity, at least 3 meg down, with very low latency to wherever you're going. And that's the key. I mean, virtual desktop is really no different than any other standard app. If you have low latency and a good internet connection, it screams right along. So,
and one of the benefits that our users have seen from that is the flexibility and the portability of that desktop experience or that desktop session. So even if they would become disconnected, whether it be due to, the fact of their slow internet connection or their ISP, or whether they do it for choice. I mean, we have a lot of users that, they work in one office, and, we have a Chicago office, so they're in Chicago, Illinois, and they're there in the morning, and at noon they disconnect or just leave their session open. They drive up to our Milwaukee office about an hour and a half away, and then they fire up their session in the Milwaukee office and pick right up where they left off. Then that evening, after they're done working in the Milwaukee office, they may check into a local hotel here. They log into the remote environment and pick up that exact same session right where they left off. Everything's up on their desktop just as they left it, as if they were in the office. And then the next morning they return back to their Chicago, their home office, and they pick up that session again right where they had left off in the hotel the night before. And so that portability is an experience that they choose those disconnects. And so, if we have any issues in our VDI environment from a management perspective, is we have users in the VDI environment that leave a session open and leave it connected unless we physically kick them off. And we have started to employ the practice of rebooting VDI sessions forcefully, kicking people off during our monthly maintenance window outages, because otherwise we have users that will stay connected to a VDI desktop for months at a time.
Is there any other advice you'd like to wrap up with for people that are considering VDI?
Doing a very good pilot group, actually using the users who are going to use the desktop, use them in your pilot group so they can actually give you constructive feedback is key. One of the things we joke about here is IT is actually very terrible testers in terms of end-user-facing technology. We're great at implementing, but we're usually not good users of a system. So one of the things we utilize is a good IT-friendly worker group who can actually give us constructive feedback. Once you're floating an idea of, hey, how was your video performance? How was the audio quality? What was the typing like? Actually create a cordial working environment with those test users so you can get solid, consistent feedback, because you think you're implementing something that works, and the user experience is hopefully is what you think it is, but sometimes you're totally off base and you got to go back and rework some of your assumptions to make sure that you're actually getting what the users actually want rather than just a piece of technology that's it's neat to deploy. You actually got to make sure that you're actually getting their needs solved. That's a key piece. From we rolled out a couple of different versions of Zen Desktop, and each version, it's not like we're reinventing the wheel, but we're providing more functionality. We got to make sure that functionality does in fact work. The second thing is you can never. I guess one of the rules we use here is you can never have enough back end speed. That's why we recently upgraded, as Rich alluded to earlier. We recently upgraded to a 10 gig infrastructure for our VDI environment. And that was big. That was a huge performance boon for us. I mean, it was fantastic, just the performance increases we saw in terms of disk latency, the time to boot, just general I/O access between VDI and the infrastructure that supports our VDI environment. It was unbelievably better. And each layer of technology that can build upon that just further speeds it up. So don't skimp on your infrastructure at all. That's the biggest piece. Is if you're going to use if you don't use quality stuff in the back end, you're going to pay the price when the user tries to access it.
Okay, excellent. Well, good sage advice, I think, for the for the listeners who are thinking about doing this themselves. And I want to thank you guys again for speaking to us about this today. And Dan and Rich, I hope to talk to you again.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Danny. Appreciate it.